All right, thank you all. Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this witness has already been sworn. Would the state proceed, please?
Yes, Judge. Could you please state your name for the record?
Hey, Gutierrez.
And Officer Gutierrez, what do you do for a living?
I'm a police officer for the city of Houston
How long have you been a Houston police officer?
for 12 years.
During your time with the Houston Police Department, have you been assigned to a division within the police department called Major Offenders?
Yes, ma'am.
Briefly, just tell the members of the jury what Major Offenders is.
So major offenders, my unit is career criminals unit. We do a lot with proactive investigations. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry.
If you can adjust it up, if you want to pull it up closer so it's not quite as awkward. There you go.
Okay, so I work for the Major Offenders Division Career Criminal Squad. We do a lot of proactive investigations, which require us to work in an undercover capacity. We also do reactive investigations, which is like reports that come in, and then we just follow up with that, and we get tips that we also follow up on regarding different types of investigations.
Is it common for your squad, is that a fair assessment of them, a squad?
Yes.
Is it common for your squad over at the Major Offenders Division to work with the Harris County District Attorney's Office, Major Offenders Division?
Yes, we work with them as well.
And is it common for us to work investigations together?
Yes.
And in fact, did we work the investigation on Leon Jacob together with your agency?
Yes, we did.
And were you part of that?
Yes, ma'am.
What was the role that you played in the investigation?
My role was mainly as a surveillance cover team to provide for our undercover that was meeting with the defendant.
So let's start with the meeting at the Olive Garden.
Mm-hmm.
When the meeting occurred at the Olive Garden, what was your assignment at that location?
I was inside the restaurant as well. We were just watching them from a distance from where they were sitting at.
When you say you were inside the restaurant, kind of describe for us the steps that you all took so that you could get inside the restaurant and be able to observe what was occurring during that meeting with the undercover officer.
So we were centralized in the restaurant, me and another officer, and we didn't know exactly where they were going to sit, so we were just trying to figure out the best possible way where we can see them, just to make sure our undercover would be safe and then nobody would get injured during that transaction.
Was it y'all's plan to get to the location, the Olive Garden location, before the target, Leon Jacob?
Yes, that's usually what we try to do, get there first, that way we can set up.
And did that happen in this case?
No.
What happened?
The defendant was already there.
So when you arrived there, are you dressed in plain clothes?
Yes.
And are you trying to just kind of blend in with
Yes.
the
I'm
crowd?
trying to blend in, just not. Yes.
She's got to ask her question so that she can take it now.
Okay.
She can't take you both down talking.
I'm sorry.
So make sure you let her finish her question
Yes, sir.
before you answer. All right, thank you.
Don't give me dirty looks if you talk over me, okay? So if you'll do me a favor, let me finish.
Your Honor, may I sit right there at this table?
You can come up here if you want to.
No.
Anywhere you would like.
I thank you.
If you'll let me finish my question.
Yes, ma'am.
Then she'll be a lot happier with me, okay? So when you go into the Olive Garden that day, was the defendant already inside?
Yes.
And who did you see him there with?
With a female that we later determined it was his girlfriend.
Okay. Did you later learn her name to be Valerie McDaniel?
Yes.
Prior to going into the Olive Garden, are you all given some intelligence so you know who you're going to be on the lookout for?
Yes.
And were you given a description and a photograph of an individual by the name of Leon Jacob?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you see him here in the courtroom today?
I do.
Okay. If you would, for the members of the jury, could you point to him and describe what he's wearing?
He's sitting right there. He has a suit on, striped tie, kind of longish hair.
Your Honor, may the record reflect this witness has identified the defendant?
And the record will so reflect.
So when you arrived to the restaurant, is it fair to say that you guys are surprised that Leon and Valerie are already there?
Yes, we were.
So what do you do at that point?
My partner and I, we just sit down where we could see them, and then we just kind of wait till the whole transaction finished.
Are you able to see the defendant from your location?
Yes.
And are you able to see your undercover officer from that location?
Yes.
How many people were at that table at the Olive Garden with your undercover officer?
There was the undercover officer and 3 other individuals.
could you see what they were doing?
No. They were, we could just see that they were just talking and conversing.
Now,
If I may, does that refer to the defendant and his, or the officers?
Oh, all of them,
Okay.
everybody.
so all four of them are talking at the table?
Yes.
Are you able to hear what they're saying?
No, we cannot.
At some point, do some of the individuals sitting at the table get up and leave the table?
Yes.
Who leaves the table?
The defendant and the undercover officer left at one point, and then also the defendant and the witness went outside as well with the defendant.
And when you say the witness, is that an individual that you knew to be Motaz Aziz?
Yes.
So from your vantage point, you're able to see first the defendant leave with the undercover,
Yes.
and then they return,
Yes.
and then you see the defendant leave with Zach or Motaz,
Yes.
and then they return.
Yes.
And all during this time, you are unable to hear anything that they're talking about or discussing, right?
Could not hear, no.
Do you leave the Olive Garden at some point?
Yes, we left after the defendant and Valerie left.
Do you continue your involvement in the case as far as surveillance goes?
Yes.
How do you do that?
Whenever they would have any type of meetings, we would be where they would meet, and then also whenever we would stage certain details, like whenever we met with the other complainant, I don't remember his name, but we staged what happened with him.
Okay, and we'll get into that with other officers. Because you were kind of on the cursory of that, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, and so, but you're involved, you're helping out however need be.
Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am.
Fast forward now to the night of the arrest. Are you involved in that?
Yes, I was present.
How were you involved?
I was outside the apartment whenever they went in. After they arrested him, they interviewed Valerie, and then once they interviewed Valerie, she signed a consent.
Let me stop you right there. But without saying what anyone was said, did they arrest both the defendant, Leon Jacob, and the defendant, Valerie McDaniel?
Yes, they did.
And at some point, were you aware that officers with the Major Offenders Division obtained a consent to search that condo?
Yes.
And were you part of that search?
Yes.
What was the main thing that you all were looking for when you're conducting a search of that condo?
We were looking for any type of device that would be able to record conversations between the defendant and our undercover.
Like what?
Cell phones, computers, anything electronic.
Are you familiar with the term burner phone?
Yes.
What does that mean to you?
Burner phone, it's a phone somebody obtains. It pretty much doesn't keep any type of information on the phone. And the only way you'd be able to identify it is through finding it and then trying to do a search on the phone.
Is it common for criminals to obtain cell phones under false names so that the phone can't be traced back to them?
Yes.
Is it common for criminals to obtain phones, like say on the street, so that again, the phone doesn't come back to their name?
Yes, ma'am.
And is it common for criminals to obtain those phones and then dispose of them after a case so that you all don't have valuable evidence to be used against them?
Yes.
So in this particular case, were you aware that a burner phone was being used by the defendant, Leon Jacob?
We weren't aware, but it was possible that he could have been.
So was that one of the things that you were looking for when you searched the condo that night?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you in fact find a burner phone for the defendant?
I did.
Where did you find it?
I found it under the bed in the bedroom.
So describe for us, if you remember, what the condo, the basic layout of the condo was.
So entering the condo, it was a living room, and then there was a long hallway to the right. Down the hallway, I think there was a restroom on the right-hand side, and then a bedroom on the left, which was for the child, and then the master bedroom was further down the hall, like at the end of the hall.
Were you aware that night that there was actually a child inside that condo?
I was not.
Okay. Did you search the room where the child was located?
We opened the door, saw the child was inside. She was asleep. We didn't want to bother her, so we just left her alone, and then there was an officer at the door just making sure she was okay. She wouldn't wake up and come outside and see everybody.
And did you later learn that the child in that room was the daughter of Valerie McDaniel?
Yes.
Natalie McDaniel?
Yes.
When you searched the condominium, you said you found the phone in the bedroom. What bedroom are you referring to?
The master bedroom.
And where in the bedroom did you locate the burner phone?
It was underneath the bed.
May I approach the witness? Officer, I'm showing you what's been pre-marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit number 14. Is this the phone that you obtained under the bed in the master bedroom at that condo?
Yes.
And once you obtained this phone, what did you do with it?
We had the undercover officer call the phone, and so I dialed the number back that was on there, and it was him, so we just hung up and kept it.
Okay, let me make sure I understand correctly. You had your undercover officer call what you believe the phone number for this telephone,
Yes.
and it rang,
I didn't ring, but there was a missed call.
okay? And so then what did you do at that point?
I just dialed the number back because it just had the name A on it, and then the undercover officer answered, so I hung up, and then,
So then you were able to identify this as the burner phone that night?
yes.
Once you were able to do that, what did you do with this phone?
I transferred it over to my partner, Morrow, and then he took custody of the phone.
Okay. Judge, I pass the witness.
Officer, I have a few questions.
Yes, sir.
My name is George Parman, and along with my associate, Mr. Popsill, represent Mr. Jacob.
Yes, sir.
Did you prepare an office report, sir, or any type of written report concerning your part of the investigation in this case?
Can you repeat it one more time?
Did you prepare an office report or any type of written document concerning your participation in this investigation?
I did not.
All right. And when you were inside the Olive Garden,
Yes, sir.
and there were a number of other individuals inside the Olive Garden, correct?
Yes, sir.
They were eating normally like people do when they go to a restaurant.
Yes, sir.
And do you know whether or not the defendant had anything to eat at the Olive Garden?
I know they did eat, but I'm not sure what it was or anything like that.
You say you know they did or did not eat.
That they did.
They did eat, all right, but you're not sure what they ordered.
No, sir.
Do you know who paid for their meal?
I don't remember who paid, no.
Did you make any inquiry as part of your investigation as to who paid for the meal at the Olive Garden that involved Leon and the undercover?
No.
Do you know of anyone in the investigation determined who paid for that meal?
I'm sure the undercover officer would know who paid.
I'm sorry?
The undercover officer who was there, he would know who paid.
Right. You had mentioned earlier that as part of your employment as a peace officer, your division, and you work pretty closely with the district attorney's office.
Yes, sir.
Right? And as such, you participated in an investigation that the district attorney's office might want you to investigate.
Yes.
And on occasion, you will take information that you received to the district attorney's office about a new investigation.
Yes.
All right. It's, as far as the burner phone is concerned, that's been identified by you. Why is it called a burner phone?
It's just a phone that somebody can obtain and then just get rid of without having anything connected to the person who received the phone.
All right. There's nothing illegal about a burner phone.
No, there's not.
And there's nothing illegal about a person getting rid of a burner phone,
No.
right?
Yes, correct.
As a matter of fact, burner phones are pretty common as far as means of communication is concerned, would you not say?
Yes, sir.
And individuals referred to by the prosecution as criminals aren't the only people that use burner phones.
No.
All right. And just because a burner phone was used in this particular case, doesn't give you any indication as to the veracity of the allegations contained in this case front of this jury, right?
No.
All right. Now, you were given a photo and description of the defendant?
Yes.
All right. And who gave that to you?
It would be the undercover officer.
And at some point in time, you thought that you would be there before Mr. Jacob and his partner or his person would be present,
Yes, yes.
but that didn't happen.
It did not.
And I think you mentioned that you were there to provide safety against physical danger that might occur to your undercover officer.
Yes, to an undercover officer or anybody else in that restaurant as well.
And to your knowledge, was there any physical danger to your undercover officer vis-a-vis Mr. Jacob?
We're not sure. We've never met him before, so we didn't know how he would act, so
Did you see any physicality
no.
take place?
No, sir.
All right. And you've listened to the audio and audio tape, have you not?
No, not all of it.
Okay. I'm talking about the phone that had been submitted to you.
Oh, I don't know what was on that phone at all.
All right. If I may have one moment, Your Honor.
Yes, please.
Are you familiar with who bought the phone?
No, I'm not.
Are you familiar with whether or not the person that bought the phone used a fake identity in purchasing that telephone?
No, sir.
Okay. Pass the witness test.
I have nothing further, Judge, and I have no objection to him being excused.
May he be excused.
That's fine.
You are excused, sir. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank
Your
you.
next witness, subject, of course, to being recalled, please.
State calls Officer Mara Cisneros.
Your Honor, this witness was sworn in during the lunch break.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon. And be sure to speak into the microphone, please.
Yes, sir.
From the state, please.
Thank you, Judge. Could you please state your name for the record?
Yes, ma'am. My name is Mauro Cisneros.
And Officer Cisneros, tell us what you do for a living.
I work for the Houston Police Department, Major Offenders Division, Career Criminal Squad,
How long have you been with the Major Offenders Division?
a little over 7 years.
You can back away just a little bit. Okay.
And how long have you been with the Houston Police Department?
This August, it'll be 27 years.
During your time with the Houston Police Department, did you have some training in order to help you achieve becoming a member of the Major Offenders Squad?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you talk us through some of that training that you had?
Yeah, some of the divisions that I worked with previously conduct follow-up investigations, criminal follow-up investigations that are assigned to us by our sergeants.
And did you have some training to help equip you with your assignment to the Major Offenders Division?
Yes, ma'am.
What kind of training did you receive?
We go through, of course, our academy training and, of course, our yearly 40-hour courses, which involve investigative topics like investigator schools.
As part of the Major Offenders Division with the Houston Police Department, is it common for you all to do undercover or covert investigations?
Yes, ma'am, our squad does.
Is that common for y'all?
Yes, ma'am.
Were you asked to do an investigation on a target by the name of Leon Jacob?
Yes, ma'am, we were.
And do you recall about when you were called in to participate in that investigation?
Yes, ma'am, I believe it was the 24th of, trying to remember. Can I check my notes?
Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am, it was the 24th of, 24th of February.
Is that 2017?
Yes, ma'am.
At the time, who was the sergeant over the Major Offenders Division?
That was Sergeant Frank Quinn.
And what's his role as the sergeant of you all?
He's in control of our unit, our squad, oversees all our actions.
And so back when you all are called in to participate in this investigation, is Sergeant Quinn the one that's kind of in charge of things?
Yes, ma'am, he was,
Is it fair to say he's overseeing the investigation and how it unfolds?
fully.
What is your first involvement with this investigation? What's the first thing that you do?
I came in a few weeks after he was approached by Harris County Special Crimes Bureau Major Offenders Division.
When you say he was approached, are you talking about Sergeant Quinn was approached?
Yes, ma'am.
So Sergeant Quinn was approached by our office, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And an effort to help conduct this investigation.
Yes, ma'am.
Question on Bordar.
I'm so sorry. Well,
I'd like to ask a question on Bordar.
you may.
Sir, when is it Sergeant Quinn?
Yes.
All right, when he was approached by the Harris County District Attorney's Office, were you present at that time?
No, sir.
That was before your involvement, correct?
Yes, sir.
So anything that you relate about Quinn's interaction with the District Attorney's Office before you're present would be basically hearsay to you?
Yes, sir.
No, we'd object to any testimony on the part of this officer about any type of actions and/or conversations that existed between the District Attorney's Office and Sergeant Quinn prior to this individual's presence.
Unless he has personal knowledge, I sustain the objection.
We're not going to go into any of the conversations, Judge, just to give context to the fact on how he became involved in the case.
Well, I don't mind you laying a predicate, but as far as conversations had, this witness is not available to testify to communications. You can set the stage, but that's about it.
Yes, Judge, we don't intend to go into any of
All
that.
right, thank you.
All right, officer, so at some point, do you become involved with Sergeant Quinn in this investigation?
Yes, ma'am.
And what's your first thing that you do on the investigation?
We meet up with the cooperating witness, Aziz.
And do you take a statement from him?
No, I do not.
Okay. Who talks with him at that point, do you know?
He's in direct contact with our UC, Javier Duran
Okay.
and Sergeant Quinn.
So you weren't privy to that conversation, correct?
No, ma'am.
All right. What is the next thing that you do?
Well, we prepare a plan on how to proceed with the undercover operation.
Now, a second ago, you referred to your UC. What's a UC?
It's an undercover police officer.
So was Jay Duran, Officer Duran, was he the undercover officer participating in this investigation?
Yes, ma'am, he's the one that we selected.
And does it depend on the type of investigation or what you all are doing as to who from your squad might be the one that's going undercover?
Yes, ma'am. Sometimes one of the officers in our squad might fit better, either, physical appearance, race, language. So it just depends on what fits best.
So we've established that some officers met with Zach and the undercover. What
Yes.
did you do next?
Well, we're monitoring the plans which we put into place. After that, what we're doing is we're contacting the complainants and advising them of the situation.
So let's take a step back. Before you talk to the complainants, were you involved in the undercover operation at the Olive Garden?
Yes, ma'am. I conducted surveillance on the outside of the. I was not on the inside, but I was outside surveillance. Yes, ma'am.
And when you say outside surveillance, does that just mean you're watching from the outside in the parking lot?
Yes, ma'am.
And from that point, are you able to see people as they come and go from the Olive Garden?
Yes, ma'am.
And was that the extent of your involvement at the Olive Garden?
Yes, ma'am.
Going forward, you mentioned that you notified the complainants about what's going on.
Yes, ma'am. Sergeant Quinn and I did.
Without saying what they told you, did you notify a Megan Veracos about what was going on?
No, ma'am. That was Sergeant Quinn.
And was Mac McDaniel also notified?
Yes, ma'am.
And who did that?
Sergeant Quinn and I.
So Sergeant Quinn was involved in notifying Megan,
Yes, ma'am.
and you were involved with him in notifying Mac McDaniel.
That's correct.
When you notify a victim like Megan or like Matt, what's the purpose of doing that?
First of all, we're concerned about their safety. We don't know if there's any other plans in play.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
I said non-responsive to the question, Your Honor.
Repeat your question, please.
What's the purpose of notifying the complainants about what's going on?
Well, to prepare for the operation and for their safety.
Once you notify Megan about what's going on, do you take her somewhere?
I was not involved in Megan's situation. I believe she was taken somewhere for her safety as well. We instructed the complainant, Mr. McDaniel, to remain, either in the house or somewhere safe, out of the way.
And so this notification occurs after the meeting at the Olive Garden.
Yes, ma'am.
Let's fast forward then. Is there a meeting at a condominium complex here in Houston in Harris County named the Willowick?
Yes, ma'am.
What is your involvement over at the Willowick?
We're also conducting surveillance as well while the UC meets up with the suspects.
And does your undercover actually go inside the condominium to meet with the defendant in this case?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you able to hear the conversation as it's unfolding between your UC and the defendant?
I couldn't monitor it. We have CID units monitoring that a lot more clearly than we do.
Once that occurs, does the undercover return from meeting with the defendant in this case?
Yes, ma'am.
And at that point, do you all make a decision about giving a death notification?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Yes, sir. Do you all make a decision about giving a death notification?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And describe for the members of the jury, when I say death notification, I know we know what I'm talking about, but give us a little context as to what you're going to do when you're going to give a death notification.
Well, what we do is we'll, in this situation, because, situations are different in different cases, but in this situation, we decided to appear at the apartment complex and notify them of the death.
And when you say notify them, who are you talking about?
Ms. McDaniel and Leon Jacob.
So at that point in the investigation, are you aware that the defendant in this case, along with Valerie McDaniel, believed that Matt McDaniel was actually dead?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And at this point in the investigation, do you also know that the defendant and Valerie McDaniel know that Megan Veracos is dead?
Yes, ma'am.
So when you're going to give the death notification, is it for both individuals or just one of the two?
It's for both.
Who does the death notification in this case?
It was Sergeant Quinn.
Where are you during that?
Behind the camera.
Okay. So you're not involved in doing the death notification?
No.
At some point, do you know that Sergeant Quinn does a death notification that night?
Yes, ma'am.
And after doing that death notification, do things fast forward and do you all end up placing the defendant and Valerie McDaniel under arrest?
Yes, ma'am, we do.
Do you do a search of the condominium with other officers that were assigned to major offenders?
Yes, ma'am.
And as part of the search, do you locate a cell phone belonging to the defendant, Leon Jacob?
Yes, ma'am.
How do you know that the cell phone belonged to Leon Jacob?
We did not know it at the time.
Okay. Did the defendant ever tell you that he had a cell phone in the apartment?
Yes, he did.
And did he direct you to where he thought that cell phone might be?
There was several cell phones.
Okay. I'm going to talk his personal cell phone
Oh.
that you located. Let's talk about that one. Did the defendant direct you to where it was located inside the condo?
Oh, yes, ma'am. He said it was his bedroom.
And did you retrieve that?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
I'm going to show you what's been pre-marked for identification purposes only as State's Exhibit number 13. Does this appear to be the phone that you collected from Willowick that night?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Once you received that phone, did you also take possession of a cell phone that Officer Gutierrez had recovered?
Yes, ma'am.
Judge, may I approach approach the witness?
Yeah, ma'am.
I'm going to show you what we've marked as State's Exhibit number 14. Is this the cell phone that Officer Gutierrez provided to you?
Yes, ma'am.
Once you obtain those cell phones, did you take those somewhere?
Yes, ma'am. We took the cell phones to the HPD property room.
And once you got to the Houston Police Department property room, who was there?
We transferred chain of custody over to Jimmy Turpin, Lieutenant Jimmy Turpin.
And is Lieutenant Turpin, do you know who he's employed by?
He's employed by the Harris County District Attorney's Office, Major or Special Crimes Bureau, Major Offenders Division.
So did you in fact give those to him, and then is it your understanding that he checked them into the property room?
Yes, ma'am. He tagged it into the Harris County property room.
Judge, I pass the witness.
Joseph, yeah, a few questions for you on cross-examination. You've testified a number of times, I think.
A few.
Yeah. Officer, you were outside, you were in an automobile, correct?
During which time, sir?
Yeah, I'm sorry, at the house where, when the officers went in.
During the undercover operation or the arrest? Undercover. Yes, sir. I was outside.
All right, and that's when the telephones were retrieved from the possession of Leon Jacob, correct?
No, sir.
All right, that was during the second time?
Yes, sir. When we conducted the arrest.
All right, now, I think you said that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that Leon Jacob directed you to where the cell phone was located.
His personal cell phone. His personal cell phone. He had asked us to retrieve it from his bedroom.
Take that mic, and just straight up. Okay, go ahead.
So he directed you to where his personal cell phone was located,
Yes, sir.
and he permitted you to retrieve that, correct?
Yes, sir.
When he ended up being arrested, were you part of the arrest itself?
Yes, sir. I was in the apartment.
All right. Did he appear to be shocked and surprised that he was being arrested?
Yes, sir.
You mentioned that you could hear more clearly. Pardon me. Another officer could hear more clearly than you the conversation had at the time of the arrest.
We have units that are monitoring with a higher frequency equipment.
And that's not your unit?
No, sir.
All right. May I approach your witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Officer, I'll wait till I get up here. I recall during your direct testimony that you looked at some notes that you had.
Yes, sir.
And may I take a look at those? Sure. I may have one more, Judge.
Briefly, please.
I don't want to erase this.
No. It opens up like that.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Officer, I noticed that a man by the name of Kubash was the first individual that made contact with law enforcement about a particular situation involving Leon Jacob.
Yes, sir.
And you understand Mr. Kubash is a bail bondsman.
Yes, sir.
And did he tell you that Leon Jacob and that Megan wanted to go to Pittsburgh?
I was not involved in that conversation, sir, no.
All right. Take a look at your notes, which are extensive, and tell the ladies and gentlemen of this jury if your notes reflect anything about a conversation with Mr. Kubash.
Yes, it does. Not with me, I'm sorry. Not with me, sorry.
All right, that's all right. That's not my question. My question is, does your phone reflect any conversations that in fact had been conversations between Mr. Kubash and, for instance, the undercover officer?
Yeah, with the undercover officer?
Well, no, the first person Kubash and who was Kubash in contact with?
My timeline and my court notes reflect a conversation between Harris County Special Crimes Bureau and Mr. Kubash.
You say your notes do or do not?
They reflect a conversation between an investigator between, that is from Special Crimes Bureau. Yes, sir.
Do they reflect any content of that conversation?
Yes, sir, some.
Sir?
Yes, sir.
And again, is there anything in the content of the conversation reflective of Mr. Kubash making a comment that Leon Jacob and Megan, the complainant in this case, was going to Pittsburgh?
Judge, I'm going to object. This calls for the witness to testify to hearsay.
Well, if I may, if it's part of his investigation and he's got the content of that conversation on...
Still hearsay, Mr. Warner.
Pardon?
If he's made notes about what somebody said, it's still hearsay if he's testifying, bro. So I sustain the objection.
Yes, Your Honor. Let me phrase it in this fashion. Is there anything in the content of your notes that reflect anything about Pittsburgh?
Which again, I'm going to object. This calls for hearsay.
Well, he's got the notes, Your Honor, and those are his notes.
Well, they're his notes, but if it's notes from what somebody told him, it's still hearsay if he repeats
Well,
it.
then I'd like to ask him that basic question as to whether or not anybody told him about that. And he can certainly, it can be objected to, but I think it's important to establish this issue that I'm trying to establish as far as Pittsburgh is concerned. It's important, it's a key ingredient in this case.
And I'm going to continue to re-urge my objection that it's hearsay.
It is hearsay, and I sustain the objection.
I pass this witness. Thank you, sir.
Nothing further, Judge.
To be excused?
Yes, Judge.
Mr. Barnum, any objection to be excused?
No, I have no objection. Call.
He's on call. Thank you so much. You are excused. Your next witness.
Thank you, sir.
State calls Captain Jimmy Turpin.
Your Honor, this witness was sworn in during the lunch hour.
Thank you. All right, from the state, please.
Thank you, Judge. Could you please state your name for the record?
Jimmy Turpin.
And Mr. Turpin, what do you do for a living?
I'm a captain investigator with the Harris County District Attorney's Office.
Talk to the jury a little bit about your background and how you became a captain over the special or the major offenders division of the Harris County District Attorney's Office.
Okay, I retired from the Houston Police Department in 2006 with 22 years service there. Was retired for a whole 2 weeks. Started with the DA's office February of 2006. Like anybody else does, started in misdemeanor, worked my way through misdemeanor into the trial bureau, felony trial bureau. Worked there approximately a year, and then I was approached about coming to special crimes, which I agreed to do, probably in around 2000, end of 2008, 2009. And I have been there, assigned to the Special Crimes Bureau ever since. Started out as an investigator there, was promoted to lieutenant, and then eventually to captain.
What is your role as captain of that division?
As captain, I oversee the investigators that are assigned to the Special Crimes Bureau. There are several different divisions within the Bureau. There's narcotics, there's money laundering, asset forfeiture, vehicular crimes, major offenders division is one of those. Sex crimes is another. So any investigator that's assigned to those divisions within our Bureau I am their supervisor. They have a immediate supervisor, which is a lieutenant over their squad, and then I will oversee that. Them.
So is it fair to say you oversee quite a few divisions that are involved in quite a few different things within the district attorney's office?
Yes, ma'am.
One of the things that you mentioned is that you're captain over the major offenders division. Do you have investigators that answer to you that work in the major offenders division?
Yes, ma'am.
Who were, and I want to talk specific to this case.
Okay.
So in this particular case, who were the investigators that were involved that you supervised?
Primarily, it was Lieutenant Mike Malden. I do believe that Investigator Brian Powell assisted in some degree, and myself.
And you mentioned Mike Malden, and is Mike a lieutenant for you?
That is correct.
So let's talk now about how you became involved in this particular investigation.
Okay.
Tell me how you first became aware that there was something going on.
On February 23rd, 2017, it was after hours, probably almost 7 p.m., 6:50, 7 p.m., I received a phone call from my chief asking me to contact the chief of...
Without saying what was said, did you receive a call from your chief?
Yes.
And within the district attorney's office, are there actually people that are higher than you are?
Yes.
Okay, considered your supervisors?
Yes.
And after you received the call from your supervisor, without saying what was said, what did you do next?
When I received a phone call, I then contacted the intake division and spoke with a person by the name of John Denholm, who is our intake chief.
Okay. Backing up a little bit, what is intake?
Intake is where charges are filed. Officers will come and file charges on people who are arrested, or they either have a warrant that they need to execute. They will come to intake to either file the charges or process the paperwork.
And prior to Hurricane Harvey, was the intake division of the Harris County District Attorney's Office actually located in the same building as the Harris County District Attorney's Office?
Yes, ma'am.
And is that the building that we see out the windows over there, 1201 Franklin?
That's correct.
Okay. So when you say that you went and talked to John Denholm with the intake division, that would have been contained within the district attorney's office?
Yes, ma'am.
And without saying what you talked with John Denholm about, tell us, who is John Denholm?
John Denholm is the chief, or was the chief, of the intake division for the Harris County District Attorney's Office.
Now, when you say chief, that's a different term than captain or lieutenant. So is he an investigator or is he a prosecutor?
He's a prosecutor.
So after talking with him, what do you do next?
I then contact a person by the name of Michael Kubosh.
And without saying what was said, do you have a conversation with Michael Kubosh?
Yes.
Do you recall what day that was?
February 23rd, 2017.
This is all occurring within the same day?
Within hours.
Okay. And this is all after about 5 p.m. that afternoon?
After 5 p.m., yes.
After you talk with Michael Kubosh, what is your next step?
I then contacted the Houston Police Department and spoke with a Officer Sharp in the Homicide Division of Houston Police Department.
And after you spoke with Officer Sharp, did someone reach out to you
Yes.
from the Houston Police Department?
Yes.
Who was that?
Officer Sharp.
Okay. And after you talked with Sharp, who did you speak with?
Michael Kubosh.
Okay. And then what did you do next?
I contacted Lieutenant, after I received the information about the matter, I contacted Lieutenant Malden and advised him of the situation, what was going on, and asked him if he would be the case agent from the DA's perspective on this particular case.
How does that work? So we have a major offenders division with the Harris County District Attorney's Office, and then there's the major offenders division with the Houston Police Department. And we've heard a little bit about how they work in conjunction with each other, but as someone who handles that relationship, talk to us about it.
Well, I have a unique perspective because I've worked both. So the Houston Police Department Major Offenders Division conducts proactive and reactive investigations similar to the Major Offenders Division within the Harris County DA's office. But they are an agency unto themselves, a police department, where we are basically a law firm that has, for the state, that has investigators who are policemen attached to them. So the Major Offenders Division within the DA's office also investigates reactive investigations, homicides, capital murder cases, any occult.
The narration, and they asked that it be question and answer.
I sustain.
So do you work then often on proactive investigations independent of the Houston Police Department?
Yes, ma'am.
And then is it also common for you to work at proactive investigations with the Houston Police Department?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you know an individual by the name of Sergeant Quinn?
Yes, ma'am.
How do you know Sergeant Quinn?
I've known him for years. I worked for him when I was with the Houston Police Department.
And at the time that this case occurred, what was his position within the Houston Police Department?
He was the sergeant over a career criminal squad within the Major Offenders Division of the Houston Police Department.
So did you, without saying what was said, did you make contact with him?
I have spoken with him. I also instructed Lieutenant Malden to make contact with him.
Okay. During this time period, were you going to be out of the office?
Yes, ma'am. That's primarily why I asked Lieutenant Malden to contact Sergeant Quinn.
Non-responsive, Your Honor, to the question asked.
Why did you ask Investigator Malden to be involved?
Because I was going to be out of town.
During the investigation that you're conducting, do you become aware of an individual by the name of Leon Jacob?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you do some research on the defendant, Leon Jacob?
Yes, ma'am.
Through your research, did you learn that he had pending cases filed with the Harris County District Attorney's Office?
Yes, ma'am.
Judge, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Captain Turpin, I'm going to show you what has been pre-marked as State's Exhibit number 15, 16, and 17. Are you familiar with these documents?
Yes.
And specifically talking about State's Exhibit number 15, is this a certified copy of the information that was filed in the assault family member case?
Yes, ma'am.
And is it entitled The State of Texas versus Leon Philip Jacob?
Yes, ma'am.
And from reading the information, are you able to determine who the complainant was alleged in that information?
Let me see here. Megan Louise Veracas.
Okay. And now showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 16, a certified copy of the a 2-year protective order. Were you familiar with that document?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And who is the protected individual in this document?
Megan Veracas.
And then showing you State's Exhibit number 17, which is a certified copy of a stalking indictment. Tell us who the defendant is on that case.
I'm sorry. The defendant, yes,
Yes.
Leon Philip Jacob.
Okay, and then the complainant in that case as well.
Megan Veracas.
Your Honor, at this time, State offers State's Exhibit 15, 16, and 17 certified copies of the documents, and I'll tender to opposing counsel for any objections he might have.
I may have a moment, Your Honor.
Briefly, please.
Yes. We have no objection.
Thank you, sir.
Other than what you previously ruled upon by the court.
Certainly. So states 15, 16, 17 are admitted.
All right, Captain Turpin, so at this point in your investigation, do you leave town for a few days?
Yes.
And do you leave Lieutenant Malden to continue the investigation from the Harris County District Attorney's Office standpoint?
Yes, ma'am.
At some point, do you return from out of town?
Yes.
And then do you re-engage in this investigation?
Yes, ma'am.
What's the next step in your investigation?
While I was off, Lieutenant Malden continued the investigation and began looking for an individual by the name of Zach.
Okay. Without saying what was said, did you become aware that Zach was actually located?
Yes.
And did you become aware about what had occurred at an Olive Garden
Yes.
and what had transpired among some phone calls between an undercover officer with the Houston Police Department and the defendant, Leon Jacob?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you become aware of a plan to go to the Willowick condo late into the night of March the 8th, 9th time period, 2017?
Your Honor, object as to the form of the question being asked. It's testimony coming from the district attorney's office as opposed to coming from the witness stand.
I'll rephrase, Judge.
You may rephrase.
Did you participate in an investigation at the Willowick condo back in March of 2017?
Yes, ma'am.
And specifically in the early morning hours of March the 9th going into the 10th?
Yes, early morning, from late March 9th into the early morning hours of the 10th, yes.
What was your role there?
I was there to facilitate any issues that may occur on scene between the Houston Police Department and our office, if there was any to arise during the investigation.
Did any?
No.
Did you become aware that at some point in those early morning hours that the defendant Leon Jacob was arrested?
Yes, ma'am.
And that Valerie McDaniel was arrested?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you then go to the Houston Police Department property room?
Yes, ma'am.
Who did you meet when you got to the property room?
I met with, several officers were there, primarily the major offenders, officers that were involved in this investigation, but Maros Cisneros was probably who you're referring to.
It is. So did you meet with Officer Cisneros?
Yes, ma'am.
And did he give you anything?
Yes, ma'am.
What did he give you?
He gave me phones and computers and an iPad that had been recovered from the Willowick location.
And what did you do with those items?
I marked and tagged those into the Harris County DA's property room.
Do you want to approach the witness? I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 13 and 14. Are these the phones that you took possession of from Officer Cisneros and then placed into the Harris County District Attorney's property room?
Yes, ma'am.
And then once they were placed into the property room, did you ever retrieve them or do anything with them?
I did not retrieve them.
And did that end your involvement with this investigation as far as the proactive investigation and then recovering evidence?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, I pass the witness.
Mr. Barnes,
Yes, may I approach, Your Honor?
you may.
Officer, I'd like to let me get up there first. Do you have exhibits 15, 16, or 17? Prosecutor has first, I'm sorry. I'm going to ask you to take a look at exhibits 15, 16, and 17. And exhibit 15 is a copy of a complaint, is it not, or a misdemeanor complaint?
That's correct.
All right, sir. And exhibit 16, pardon me,
I'm sorry, yes.
exhibit 16 is a protective order, is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. And there's an attorney by the name of Stacy Bond who was representing Mr. Jacob, correct?
On the paper, yes, sir. That's
All
what
right.
it says.
My name doesn't appear anywhere in here, correct?
Not that I've seen, no.
All right. Nor does my co-counsel,
Well, I don't know
Mr.
your question.
Papasil.
No.
All right. Now, I notice on exhibit number 16, there is a paragraph beginning with, and it's the third paragraph down,
Yes, sir. beginning
with the court, correct?
That's correct.
And let me see if I can put that up on a, yeah. I'm going to put it up on the projector.
Sure. You want this?
Yeah, go ahead, thanks. Can you read that second paragraph?
Should be
May I
on
step?
your screen, right?
Oh, here we go. Okay. Beginning with the court.
Go ahead. Yes, beginning with.
The court finds that the applicant and respondent are members of the same family or household, or were previously involved in a dating relationship. For the limited purpose of enforcing this order, and then it's scratched out.
All right, what is scratched out?
The court finds that family violence has occurred, and that family violence is likely to occur again in the future, and that the respondent, Leon Jacob, has committed family violence. The
All right,
court,
let me stop you right there. So that particular portion that indicates that Leon Jacobs has committed family violence and is likely to commit family violence in the future, and the court finds that family violence has occurred, that's been scratched out,
yes, sir.
correct?
Yes, sir.
And would that indicate to you that the court did not find evidence to support those particular sentences in that paragraph?
I would not want to testify as to why they scratched that out.
All right, but somebody obviously scratched them out.
That's correct. It appears.
And is it fair to assume that those did not pertain to Leon Jacob, if they're scratched out?
I'm going to object that call for speculation. This witness has already stated he doesn't know why they were scratched out.
Calls for a legal conclusion, sustained.
Who would have had access to this particular document to scratch it out?
I would assume the prosecutor of the court at this time, or are the attorneys.
All right, there's nothing on here to suggest that I participated in this proceeding, correct?
No, sir.
Nor my co-counsel?
No, sir.
All right. As a matter of fact, there's no lawyer attached to this particular document.
Just the name Stacy Bond.
Stacy Bond, correct. All right. But is it fair, I may have just asked this, but is it fair to assume that scratching it out, somebody inferred or at least directly made a determination that that particular scratched out document or sentence was inapplicable in this proceeding to Leon Jacob?
Judge, I'm going to object. This calls for legal conclusion and speculation on the part of this witness.
Sustain it.
Let's go down to the next sentence, officer. The court finds the following protective orders are, and would you read that for me, for us?
For the safety and welfare and in the best interest of the applicant, and are necessary for the prevention of family violence.
Now, there's scratched out portions of that particular sentence, correct?
Yes.
And would you read the scratched out portions for the ladies and gentlemen of this jury?
For the safety and welfare, and are necessary for the protection of family violence, or excuse me, prevention of family violence.
So again, the same question. There is somebody in authority, we don't know if it's a prosecutor, a court clerk, that has scratched that portion out of the protective order, and it would be inferred that it didn't pertain to Leon Jacob. Would that be fair?
Objection calls for legal conclusion and speculation on the part of this witness.
I sustain it. I don't think we've heard that he's an attorney.
He's not.
I sustain it.
I may have a moment, Your Honor. Left-hand side is a signature for an assistant district attorney, prosecuting attorney for Harris County. Who would that have been?
The name is Beth Barron.
All right. Now, in your familiarity with courts and the system and things of that fashion, is it a fair assessment, sir, that these signatures, both of Stacy Bond and an assistant district attorney, were signed on this document after those items referred to in the previous couple of questions have been scratched out?
That would be the norm.
That would be the normal thing to do.
Yes, I would not sign a document prior to something. I would not believe that anyone would sign a document prior to knowing its contents.
And also, if somebody scratched out a portion of a document that had already been signed, that could be tantamount to a criminal act, could it not?
If you altered a document after a signature, yes.
Okay. A few more moments, Your Honor, before I pass the witness. You testified in the bond hearing, did you not?
Yes, sir.
And I was the attorney asking questions of you.
You were.
There were no custodial statements made by Mr. Jacob, correct?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. And are you aware that he was surprised and shocked at the time he was arrested?
I'm sure he was.
Okay. Anybody would be, correct?
I would imagine.
Unless they expected to be arrested.
I'm not going to suggest what he thought. I would be surprised.
Okay. Was there any conversation with Mr. Kubash?
I'm sorry.
Yes, sir. Did you have any conversation with Michael Kubash?
I did.
And was there discussion about, in that conversation about going to Pittsburgh?
Objection, this calls for hearsay.
Sustained.
Were you privy, or did you suggest, or did you in any way incorporate into your conversation with Michael Kubash this whole concept about going to Pittsburgh in any way?
And Judge, I'm going to object, this calls for hearsay.
Well, I'm asking about what he did.
It's over.
No.
Did not.
Not with Mr. Kubash, no.
All right, who with?
The HPD officer, Sharp.
All right. And was that information you provided or he provided to you?
He provided me.
That there was information collected during this investigation that would underscore the idea of going to Pittsburgh, that is making going to Pittsburgh, correct?
I'm going to object to the form of the question.
I didn't understand it quite. Would you rephrase, please?
Yes, Your Honor. The conversation about Pittsburgh, did that conversation was originated by whom, sir?
Officer Sharp.
All right. And did Officer Sharp mention where he obtained that information about going to Pittsburgh?
Objection, hearsay.
Well, I'm just asking if,
Where he obtained it from would be based on hearsay.
Sustained.
it didn't come out of the blue, did it?
I have no idea.
Right. But you heard it, and you heard it from a fellow law enforcement officer.
In a certain context, yes.
Right. And certainly, it would be something that you would be interested in during the course of your investigation of Leon Jacobs, correct?
I was interested in that comment because it relayed to me that Ms. Veracos was going to be safe because she was leaving due to the threat that was being made.
Right. And, of course, you've documented that in your offense report.
That was prior to any offense report that was made, and no, that's a conversation that Officer Sharp and I had.
All right. Were tickets purchased?
All that I'm aware of is that she left town. I don't know who purchased the tickets, who did any of that.
They were purchased.
I know she left town.
Okay. Do you know who made flight arrangements? If you know.
I'm not sure.
Okay. Have you been subpoenaed to come down today?
Yes.
Were actually served a subpoena?
I received it via email.
I'm sorry?
I received it via email.
Okay. And how did you acknowledge that receipt?
I'm not actually sure that I did acknowledge it because I knew I was going to be present and just frankly didn't.
So you weren't personally served?
I had not been personally served.
And you're doing this as a cooperative witness for the state of Texas, correct?
I'm doing this as a witness for the state of Texas and because I had been subpoenaed by you.
Right. And if, in fact, we had been subpoenaed you via email or in any other way other than personal service, is it fair to say you would not feel obligated to come down and testify on behalf of the defense based on the failure to have you personally served?
Well, I would have been here either way because I was part of this investigation, so.
Okay. So you're telling this jury you would have showed up for the defense had we subpoenaed you?
If you subpoenaed me, I would have.
Emailed you the subpoena?
I was made aware that you had inquired as to whether I was going to be here or not, apart from the subpoena, and so I was going to be here either way. Whether you subpoenaed me or as a witness for the state, I'm part of this investigation, I would be present at the trial.
And it would be logical, would it not, for me to assume that you were going to be present inasmuch as you had previously testified in the bond hearing in this case?
I would expect to be questioned in regards to this matter.
Anything else? We have nothing further, Your Honor. Thank you, sir.
Do you know if law enforcement requested Megan Veritas to leave town?
Yes,
And do you know if law enforcement requested, or if Megan Veritas went to Pittsburgh at the request of law enforcement?
yes,
So she went to Pittsburgh after she became aware of the threat to her safety?
that is correct.
Judge, I'd like to take him on board, if I may.
You may.
Also, I thought you testified when I asked you some questions about why she went to Pittsburgh. You didn't partake in that decision.
I did not purchase her a ticket or ask her to leave. I got beat to the punch, actually, by the HPD homicide.
Okay. So based on your testimony to this jury, all that's based on what you have concluded, not interaction with Megan at all, but what you've concluded as the reason why she went to Pittsburgh.
The information that I'm aware of is based on a conversation with Officer Sharp.
That's not responsive to my question. I'm asking now.
Restate it, please.
Yes. The information that you've received, strike that. You have no personal knowledge yourself of why she went to Pittsburgh. It's based on what you've heard, correct?
Correct.
All right. I don't have anything further. Thank you, Officer.
When Mr. Parnham asked you if Officer Sharp had ever talked about Pittsburgh with you, and you said yes, was it because Officer Sharp told you that Megan had been requested by HPD
Your
to go
Honor,
to Pittsburgh?
asking for incorporated requested a conclusion and also testimony from the prosecutors in the form of a question in front of this jury.
Judge-
Also asking hearsay, I believe.
Well, Judge, it's in response to the defense questioning him on what Officer Sharp told him about Pittsburgh. He has a right to tell the jury what Officer Sharp said about Pittsburgh. He's left the misimpression with the jury that they had a discussion about Pittsburgh prior to the threat on Megan, and that's not true.
You know,
I already
I've
testified
not-
to such.
You know,
I sustain his objection.
No, nothing further from this witness, Judge.
And Your Honor, I'm going to object to the prosecutor's inference that I've tried to misstate anything in front of this jury.
I don't think she intended that, and if she did,
Sir.
I'm sure that that wasn't her intent. And I will to state also on the record that I'm sure that's not your intent.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Nothing further, Judge.
Your excuse subject to recall. Next witness.
State calls Lieutenant Mike Malden.
Your Honor, this witness was sworn in during the lunch hour.
All right, thank you. From the state, please.
Thank you. Could you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
Hello, my name's Mike Malden. I'm a lieutenant investigator with Harris County District Attorney's Office.
Lieutenant Malden, if you would just briefly tell us about your experience with law enforcement.
After high school, I went to Sam Houston State University, got a bachelor's degree in police science and law enforcement. After that, I got hired on with Harris County Constables Precinct 5. I worked there for 13 years, mostly in a patrol function. I got promoted to sergeant. From there, I applied with the Harris County District Attorney's Office and was hired as an investigator in 2007.
And what is your current assignment with the Harris County District Attorney's Office?
I am a lieutenant investigator with assigned to the Major Offenders Division.
And how long have you been doing that?
With major offenders?
Yes, sir.
About 4 years now.
And we just heard from Captain Jimmy Turpin. Is he your supervisor in major offenders?
Yes, ma'am, he is.
I want to go back to February, March timeframe of 2017. Was Captain Jimmy Turpin your supervisor back then?
Yes, he was.
And without saying what was said, did it come to your attention that the District Attorney's Office would be participating in an investigation involving an individual by the name of Leon Jacob?
Yes.
And did you work with the Houston Police Department in that investigation?
Yes, I did.
Okay, what was your role initially during the beginning stages of this investigation?
I was called on February 23rd by Captain Turpin, and it basically assigned the case to assist. The following day, I researched Mr. Jacob as well as some information I was given by Captain Turpin.
Okay. Did you begin looking for an individual by the name of Zach?
Yes.
Talk to us about your investigation and trying to determine the identity of this Zach.
I had the name Zach, and a possible phone number that belonged to Zach. And I began researching that phone number in various databases and reports and stuff that we have access to.
Were you able to come up with a lead in determining who or what the real identity of Zach was?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Okay. Eventually, were you able to determine what his real name was?
Yes.
Do you recall about the date that you were able to determine the correct identity of Zach?
February 28th is when I identified the identity of Zach.
Okay. Once you identified Zach, did you make efforts to contact him?
Yes.
Okay. And once you identified the true name, what was that name?
Motaz Azi.
Were you able to make contact with him?
I was.
Do you recall the date that you made contact with him?
March 6th.
Okay. 2017?
Yes, 2017.
Where did you initially make contact with him?
At a Starbucks on the west side of Houston.
Did you, without saying what was said, did you talk to him at that Starbucks?
I did.
And after you talked to him, where did you go?
Back to our office. Brought him back to our office to talk to him in a more official capacity in the interview room.
When you meet him at Starbucks, who's present for that interview?
It was myself and my partner at the time, Brian Powell, and Motaz Azi.
Was that statement recorded?
Not in the one in the car, no, it wasn't. We were just talking to him.
And when you say in the car, is that a car in the, I assume, the parking lot of Starbucks?
Yes.
Okay, and so then you mentioned you took him back to the district attorney's office. What was the purpose of that?
Just to get a recording of his statement and of what had happened and taken place up to that point.
Did you take a statement from him?
Yes, I did.
After taking a statement from him, did you obtain some property from him?
I did the following day.
Okay, so on March the 7th, 2017, you obtained property from him.
Yes.
And what property did you obtain from him?
It was 2 watches and 2 appraisals that he had given me.
Okay. And did I ask you to bring those with you to court today?
Yes, you did.
Once you took possession of those from Zach, what did you do with them?
I packaged them and placed them into our property room, the Harris County District Attorney's Office property room, with an evidence tag, and logged them in.
And then when you retrieved them for trial, was that the first time that you retrieved those items?
No, there was one time, I'd have to look at my report for the date, but at one point I went back to the property room, checked them out, and made photographs of them documenting the watches.
Was that at my request?
Yes.
Did you check them back into the property room after you took photographs of them?
Yes.
Okay, and then did you bring those items with you to court today?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And did I ask you to mark those items for me?
Yes.
Judge, may I approach the witness?
And this is just the notation of me checking them out for photographs.
Okay, and I'm going to ask you about that. So I noticed that this is an envelope with some red tape sealed on it and some initials. Talk
Yes.
to the jury about what that is.
So when this goes into the property room, it's sealed with evidence tape, which is tamper-proof tape. Then it is initialed and dated. And these are my initials, MM. And it's dated at the time that it was placed into the property room.
Okay, and then you mentioned a subsequent time where I asked you, at my direction, you actually went over to the property room and took photographs of the items. Is that also indicated on the envelope?
Yes, it is. So the original seal's broken, and it's resealed and redated with a notation on the date that it was checked out of the property room. Or it actually wasn't checked out. I just went into the property room, opened it, took photographs, and resealed it. And but that notation, since the seal was broken, is notated on the envelope.
Okay, slow down just a little bit for me,
Okay.
okay? Okay, so I'm going to show you now what's been marked for identification purposes only as States Exhibits 34, 35, 37, and 38. Do you recognize all of that?
Yes.
Are these the items that you retrieved from Zach and then checked into the property room, or MOTAS?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time, I'm going to offer into evidence States Exhibit 34, 35, 37, and 38, and I tender it to opposing counsel for any objection.
Yeah, no objection.
Other than what has previously been heard on the previous motion.
They're admitted, but go over it since they're not on your exhibit list. Tell me what they are again, please.
Yes, Judge. States Exhibit 34 is a Cartier watch. States Exhibit 35, Cartier watch. States Exhibit 37 is an appraisal, and States Exhibit, 38 is also an appraisal.
All right, thank you, and they're admitted.
Did you also obtain an additional item from Zach?
Yes, I did.
Was that on the same day that you obtained the watches and the appraisal from him, or was that on a different day?
That was a different day later on.
Did you learn about this additional item from Zach or from someone else?
From someone else.
And then did you go back to Zach and ask him about this additional item?
Yes.
Okay. What was that additional item?
It was a ring.
And did you bring that with you to court as well today?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Judge, may I approach the witness? And did you follow the same procedure in tagging this item of evidence as you did the other items?
Yes, I did.
And may I open this? And at my request, did you also mark this item?
I did, yes.
And are these also your initials on the outside of the envelope along with the date?
Yes.
We have marked this as States Exhibit number 36. Is this the ring that you went back and obtained from Zach?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, at this time, State offers States Exhibit number 36. I tender to opposing counsel for any objections he might have.
Got our objection based on previous motion that had been heard.
It's admitted.
It's 36, Judge.
Right.
At some point during this investigation, did you leave town?
Yes,
Okay, so did you take vacation?
I did.
So you and Captain Turpin, did you take turns taking vacation?
We did. It was spring break, and we both had vacations already planned.
Okay. So when you left town, did you miss out on the investigation portions that occurred at Olive Garden and then also at the Willowick? Or just the Willowick?
Just Willowick. I believe I was still in town for the Olive Garden, but I was not present at Olive Garden.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the meeting that occurred at Olive Garden. Prior to that, were you part of the team that arranged the Olive Garden meeting?
Yes.
How did that meeting come to fruition?
After locating Motaz Aziz, we had him, he made a telephone call to Mr. Jacob, and the meeting was arranged at that point.
Were you present for that telephone call?
I was.
Where did that telephone call take place?
Inside my vehicle.
And who else was inside the vehicle with you?
It was myself, HPD Officer Javier Duran, and Motaz Aziz.
What was the date that that phone call took place?
That would have been on March 7th.
So that would be Tuesday of that week, if you remember.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. So during that conversation, you're present, the undercover officer's present, and then the person you identified, Zach, to be is present.
Yes, that's correct.
Are you able to hear both sides of the conversation?
I am. It was on speaker.
And is that conversation recorded?
Yes, it was.
Who was recording the conversation?
Officer Duran recorded the conversation.
During that conversation, were you listening to what was being said between Zach and the defendant, Leon Jacob?
Yes, I could hear both sides.
And going into this conversation, how many complainants were involved in this case?
Going into the conversation, there was one target, one complainant involved.
And who was that?
That was Megan.
Okay. And then after this conversation, how many complainants are potentially involved?
There was two.
Talk to us about how that came about.
During the conversation, Mr. Jacob had made a comment about taking care of both problems, which led us to believe there was two people that were targets now.
Okay. So initially, when you all become involved in the investigation, was it your belief there was just one target?
Yes.
And then after this phone call, your belief now is there are two potential targets?
Yes, that's correct.
What was Zach or Motaz Aziz, what was his response when the defendant said that he wanted to take care of both problems?
He paused and looked at both of us and shrugged his shoulders and put his hands up like he was not aware of, this was new information to him.
Okay. And so what was your response to that?
We told him I couldn't talk, but I made the motion like this, like to keep talking. And he said, okay, and then continued with the conversation.
So based on the body language and the eye contact that Motaz made with you, was it your impression that he was surprised that the defendant wanted you to take care of both problems?
Yes.
After this conversation, is that when the meeting occurred at the Olive Garden?
Yes, it did the following day.
And I think you mentioned that you were not present for the Olive Garden.
I was not.
And then were you present for the subsequent phone calls or the meeting at the Willowick condo? Were you present for those?
No.
Afterwards, after you meet with Zach, after the Olive Garden meeting, do you leave town and then return?
Yes.
And then at our office's request, do you obtain a search warrant for electronic devices that were recovered in this investigation?
Yes, I did.
Judge, may I approach the witness? I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 19. Do you recognize this?
Yes, this is the search warrant I obtained for the phones.
Okay. And is this a certified copy?
Yes.
And was it signed by a judge?
It is signed by a judge.
Okay. And I'm showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 13 and 14. Did you check those items out of the property room?
Yes,
Prior to
ma'am.
obtaining this warrant?
Yes, I did.
And what was the purpose of doing that?
The purpose of checking these out of the property room was to obtain identifying numbers for the phone to be included in the search warrant, so I could get an accurate description.
And so did you obtain that description?
Yes, I did.
And did you place that in the search warrant?
Yes.
Okay. Once you obtained the search warrant for the cell phones, what did you do with those two devices?
I completed the DFU, a digital forensics unit submission form, and turned them over to the digital forensics unit along with the copy of the search warrant and the submission form.
Okay. When you say the digital forensic unit, explain what that is to the jury.
That is an in-house, they're with the DA's office, group of investigators that's trained in analyzing electronics such as cell phone and computers and doing a forensics analysis of the phone.
Okay. So once you turn the phones over to them, does that end your involvement with those devices?
Yes.
I mean, you're not in charge of downloading them or anything like
No.
that? Okay.
I was notified when it was complete, but I'm not in charge of downloading or any part of the analysis of it.
Once you were notified that they were complete, what did you do?
Got a copy of the download from them.
Do you know, and if you don't, that's okay, but are you aware of who with our office did the actual download of these phones?
I know Investigator T-Fam and Investigator Nathan Gates were involved. I couldn't tell you who looked at which one, or I'd have to look at the DFU report.
And are they the ones that would have been involved with the content of these phones?
Yes.
And would they be the people to talk to about the content of these?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, State offers State's Exhibit Number 19 into evidence. And I'll turn it over to the counsel for any objections.
No, based on the previous motion filed as it relates to these, and the court has ruled on that previous motion.
Subject to those, you have no objection.
I'm sorry?
Subject to your
No, that's
prior
fine.
objections. Okay, they are admitted then, thank you. Number 19.
Judge, may I have just a moment?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you, and without saying what was said, did you have a conversation during the course of your investigation with an individual by the name of Laura Thurlow?
Yes.
And did you take a statement from her?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And after submitting the phones, talking with Laura, and doing the other things, did that end your involvement with the investigation portion?
Yes.
Your Honor, I pass the witness.
Mr. Porter.
Yes, Judge. Briefly, Officer, I believe that you issued subpoenas for bank records,
I did.
and you issued subpoenas for witnesses
Yes.
and phone records.
Yes.
All right. Let me talk to you a little bit about this ring.
I'm sorry, the what?
Yeah, ring.
Oh, the ring, yes, sir.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Do you know if in fact that is the exact ring that Zach received, or did Zach swap that ring for another ring?
That's the ring Mr. Z gave me. I don't know for sure if that's the same ring that was given to him, but he told me it was.
All right. And if that's, obviously, if he told you it was the same ring and it was not, he's not telling you the truth, all right, about the ring.
That would be correct, yeah.
Cut one over, all right?
Briefly, please.
Thank you, sir.
Anything further, Judge?
Your excuse, very well, sir. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you. Your next witness, please.
Nicholas Twan, Pham, Judge.
All right, thank you all. Please be seated. Let's continue. Call your next witness, please.
State Coast Officer Twan Pham, Judge.
Very well.
Yeah, proceed, Judge.
You may.
Could you state your name for the record, please?
My name is Twan Pham,
And could you spell that for the court reporter, please?
Tuan Pham.
And try to speak up a little bit.
Yes, sir.
And how are you employed, sir?
I'm an investigator at the Harris County District Attorney's Office,
And where are you currently assigned?
Digital Forensics Unit.
And how long have you been an investigator with the DA's office?
Approximately 8 years.
Could you tell us a little bit about your background before you became an investigator at the DA's office?
I worked at the Pasadena ISD Police Department, assigned to the Houston Metro Internet Crimes Against Children's Task Force.
And how long were you there?
I was there for approximately 5 years.
Did you work in law enforcement anywhere else before that?
No, sir.
And what do you do over at where you're assigned currently at the DA's office in your division?
Mainly we do digital forensics.
What is digital forensics?
That's basically where we take electronic devices, for example, cell phones, tablets, computers, and we download all the contents of it, put it into a readable format for presentation to the court.
And the items that you're talking about, what you're speaking about really is evidence collected in cases, correct?
Correct.
And I imagine there's some sort of training that you'd have to undergo to be assigned to the division you're in and do the things you do. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, what kind of training have you received in regard to your role?
I approximately have a couple of thousand hours ranging from digital forensics, from the vendor themselves, FTK, access data, in-case. I've also had training from other agencies such as the FBI and the Secret Service, where they send you to schools that teach you how to download devices and put them into a readable format.
And do you recall how it is that you became involved in this investigation?
Yes, sir, I do.
Could you tell us about that?
Two phones were, actually several devices were brought to us, and they were asked for them to be downloaded and all the contents given out into a report.
And is it common for you to download a device or devices, not just in this case, but in any case, pursuant to a signed search warrant?
Yes, sir.
And in this case, do you recall whether or not there was a signed search warrant for the two phones that we'll be talking about today?
Yes, sir, there was.
And could you tell us a little bit about what the process is like? When you said download the contents of, how exactly does that work?
We have a device which is on our computer. It's a universal forensic extraction device where it has different cell phone models. We select the according model, we attach the device to our computer, and then we download that into either a PDF format or HTML report at the end.
And this report that is put out at the end, does that organize the content that's pulled from the phone in any sort of order?
Yes, sir, it does.
And how does it organize it?
For example, it can do text messages in one category, it can do pictures in another category, videos, different databases, different applications as well.
May I approach, Judge? Officer Pham, I'm going to show you for identification purposes what I've marked as State's Exhibit 39 and State's Exhibit 40, and tell me whether or not you recognize those disks in that drive.
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay. And how is it that you recognize State's Exhibit number 39?
That is a thumb drive that I just downloaded the report to.
Okay. And State's Exhibit 40?
That is also a DVD that came out of our office.
Okay. And these two different items would represent downloads from two different devices, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. I'm going to show you what has been marked as State's Exhibit 13 and tell me whether or not you recognize that item.
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay. Can you tell us what it is?
This is an iPhone telephone.
Okay. And is there a unique identification number that you've attached to this phone in regards to your involvement in this case?
Yes, sir, there is.
And there's a tracking number that your office keeps in regard to this particular item?
That is correct.
Okay. State's Exhibit 14, same question to you. Is that sticker on there or any unique identifying number on there present that identifies it as the phone or the other phone involved in this case?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay. Now, the iPhone, State's Exhibit 13, that's going to be associated with State's Exhibit number 39, correct?
That is correct.
And State's Exhibit 14 is going to be associated with the contents of State's Exhibit 40, correct?
That is correct.
Now I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 41, and if you could flip through those as I hand them to you, I'd appreciate it. State's 42 now. State's 43. State's 44. State's 45. states 46. Do you recognize those items?
Yes, sir, I do.
Now, were you asked at any point to search through the contents of the iPhone, the download from the iPhone, and see if you could locate specific information?
Yes, sir, I was.
Okay. And do these exhibit states 41 through 46 represent printouts of the information that was asked of you to find?
Yes, sir, it is.
And again, states 41 through 46 is going to be exclusive to the contents of the iPhone, correct?
Correct.
This time, Judge, we'd offer states 13 and 14. For the phones, defense counsel, as well as states 41 through 46.
I just one brief moment, Your Honor.
Let's do 13, 14 first. I get those out of the way. Any objection to 13, 14?
No objection to 13 and 14, Your Honor.
13, 14 admitted.
No objection to 41.
Forty-one is admitted.
No objection to 46, 44, or 43, Your Honor, or 42.
What about 45?
Can we approach on 46? No objection to 45.
I'm sorry, please, what'd you say?
No objection to 45, Your Honor, and can we approach real fast on 46?
Thought you'd already said no objection to 46, but okay, so 40, 42, 43, 44, 45 admitted, and so approach on 46, please.
Permission to publish, Judge.
Please.
Officer, I'm going to show you what's been admitted here, State's Exhibit number 41. Let me ask you before I ask you about the actual contents of this exhibit. On certain devices, is it possible in your report to have the same type of messages categorized in two different ways?
Yes, sir.
And what I mean by that is, say for instance, I have what we call an iMessage versus what's called a short message service message, which is SMS. How would those show up differently in the report?
For an iMessage, it would be categorized in one category, and for SMS, it would be a separate category for that.
Okay. And so what we're looking at now, can you tell which one of those two that this represents?
I believe those are iMessages.
Okay. And just let me zoom in here a little bit. I know it may be difficult to see, but could you tell us the names of the parties that you see involved in the conversations that are represented by this string of messages?
The first one is Dr. Leon Jacob, and the second one is Megan H.
Now, were you specifically asked to search for messages concerning those two parties?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, 42 is represented down here below. These would be what you referred to before as the SMS type messages, correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And does it appear to be between the same parties?
Yes, sir, it does.
Dr. Leon Jacob right there and Megan H right here.
Correct.
Taking your attention back to State's Exhibit 41, I'm going to start on the second page here. This date and time here at the top, can you make out what that is? Let me zoom in a little bit for you. And is it up on your screen next to you?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. Can you make out that date and time?
It's January 13th, 2017 at 10:28 a.m.
Okay, and what does UTC -6 mean?
So universal time code is just that 0, and then the offset is for whatever time zone that you're in. So the -6 is for our time zone.
It's like Greenwich Mean Time.
Correct.
So January 13th, 10:28 a.m., correct?
Yes, sir.
And as we go down the page here, and we see these messages, I'm going to flip over to the next page and go to the bottom of this page. What time do we have here and what day?
January 13th of 2017 at 3:25 p.m.
So this is the same day, but 5 hours later.
Correct.
I'm going to the next page. And how many, just give me an estimate if you can, how many messages do you think are contained on this page? You'd say 10, 12?
I'd say about that.
I'm going to go past that page, now to the following page, and in the middle of this page, can you tell me what the time and date is on that?
January 13th of 2017 at 7:30 p.m.
So we're now 2.5 full pages later, and we're still on the same date.
Correct.
Now, State's Exhibit number 43. Were you also asked to search and compile a list of times that a specific name was entered into some sort of web search engine from that phone, the iPhone?
Yes, sir, I was.
Okay. And what name were you searching for?
Megan Veracos.
This is going to be page number 3 of State's 43 I'm showing you here. This number on the left-hand side, is that a chronological number of the number of times you found that name searched?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So as we go down the page, we see 9, 10, 11, 12, and it will continue on. How many times you saw that name searched on his phone in a given period of time?
That is correct.
Do you recall the time frame you were looking at in regards to how many times that name was searched?
I believe it was January 13th was the starting of 2017, and I believe it was February 13th.
Could it have been March yet? Do you know?
March, I'm sorry.
Now, what kind of searches are represented on here? And what I mean by that is, does this mean they're searched on a specific website? They're just generally searched through Google? What's going to be accounted for in this list?
Mainly Google searches and other search engines that were used, such as iPhones use Safari. So when you use that web search to type in a name, it uses different web crawlers to search.
Okay. So, for instance, down here on page 5, and I believe you can't put it up here to show you. So page 5 down here at the bottom, this entry is concerning the website LinkedIn.
Correct.
And the name search is Megan Veracos.
That is correct.
Okay, so when you said other search engines, you're talking about other sites that might have personal information on like somebody's name. So if somebody searched somebody on Facebook or LinkedIn or White Pages or any search engine like that, it would be represented in here.
Yes, sir.
Now, some of these, if you look at the time and date on it, to be fair, there's some redundancies, correct? I mean, there are, even though it's late, it's numbered chronologically, these times and dates are so close together that it appears it's part of the same search.
That is correct.
And would that be the best way to determine whether or not that's part of the same search, is looking at the time and date of search?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So despite the fact that there are some redundancies, I'm going to go to the last page here. And what is the total number that you found of the number of times her name was searched in that time period you described?
277.
When you were asked to search through the phone for specific information that may be relevant to this investigation and this case and the prosecution thereof, did you find anything else that you thought might be relevant?
Yes, sir, I did.
I'm going to show you State's Exhibit number 46 and direct you to the bottom here. And tell us what portion of this you thought may be relevant to this investigation.
There were searches such as tools for hackers, where it would show like how you would find a car.
For instance, at the bottom of this page here, it says, find a car via LoJack.
Yes, sir.
That's kind of an unusual search, correct?
Correct.
Deep web links. What's the deep web?
Deep web is similar to like the dark web, where you would have other people's information that was possibly stolen and uploaded to the dark web.
Further on up, line item 1751, specifically here we see dark web find a car, correct?
Correct.
And then right around the same time, just a little bit before that search, there's a search here, or there's some line items representing the search for Holiday Inn downtown Houston.
Correct.
Do you have any personal knowledge of where Megan worked?
I believe she worked at the Holiday Inn.
State's Exhibit number 45 is what I'm publishing now. Would these be representative of the SMS type messages?
Yes, sir, they are.
And what is the name you see here, starting about line 53, as the recipient of messages coming from the defendant's phone?
Laura Thurlow?
Next page, starting at the top. I'll just scroll down.
Laura Thurlow? Brian Bruckner?
And then towards the bottom.
Mika? Laura Thurlow?
Several messages to Laura Thurlow.
Yes, sir.
And once you're done processing the contents of these devices, what do you do with that report?
I submit a copy to the original case agent and the whatever ADA is working on the case.
And then if necessary or if you're requested, you do specific searches like you were asked for in this case.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
I'll pass it to Mr.
For the defense, please.
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. Good afternoon. Is it detective?
Investigator?
Investigator Tom?
Yes, sir.
Just real briefly, you mentioned earlier about this dark web that doesn't just only apply to people's information, does it?
No, sir.
A lot of other things on there.
Yes, sir.
And it's not illegal to access the dark web, is it?
No, sir.
And also, it's not illegal to search for somebody on the internet, is it?
No, sir.
Nor is it illegal to text somebody and send them a message.
No, sir.
Now, you testified earlier today that you were asked to locate specific information, correct?
Correct.
Did you only look for that information, or would you broaden your scope to other areas?
I just looked for that information.
Just that information. And it's only what was told would be relevant to you from the state, is that correct?
There's an argument of the judge.
Appreciate it.
Yes, Your Honor. You only thought what was relevant because the state would say it was relevant. Is that a fair assessment? You were only looking for that which the state told you to look for?
Correct.
And they specifically told you what to go and find?
As far as the name searches?
As far as the data search that you conducted?
Yes, sir.
During your search, would you go through and analyze any of the information on there?
As far as reading it?
Yeah, as far as reading like the searches, what web browser he was using?
Yes, sir.
That information.
Yes, sir.
And how about the text message as well? Would you go through and read the messages?
Not every single one of them, no, sir.
But you would read some of them?
Yes, sir.
Would you eliminate anything off of your list if you felt that it wasn't relevant?
No, sir, I did not.
So you would give over everything that you found?
Correct.
But you weren't looking for everything, just what you were told to look for?
Correct.
What is Holiday Inn?
A hotel
And what do people use the hotel for?
to sleep in?
So Leon searching for the Holiday Inn could be him just trying to find a hotel to go stay in for the night.
It is possible.
Now, on a cell phone, you have a web browser that can have multiple tabs open. Is that correct?
That is correct.
You can have multiple things being searched for at a time. Is that also correct?
That is also correct.
Now, if you close out the web browser, those tabs can remain open. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, they can.
And anytime you would access that web browser back again, all of those tabs would be refreshed. Is that not correct?
That is possible.
So then a brand new search would be run, whether or not he was actually searching for something.
Correct.
So if I have it on my cell phone, let's say I have a tab open for Justin Bieber. I close it out, I open my phone back up to go to YouTube. It's automatically going to run that search again to refresh that web browser for Justin Bieber. Is that not correct?
I don't believe it works like that. If you were to do a Google search on Justin Bieber and you close the web browser and then you open up YouTube, I don't think it will search for you.
I wouldn't be closing that tab. I'll be opening up a new tab. Let's say that.
Oh, I see what
And
you're
then
saying.
The process will go idle. The web browser will still be open, but it's idle, so it's in the background.
Would it continuously search while you're off the tab is what you're asking?
No, I'm asking then if I go back and click again on my phone to access my web browser, all of the open tabs would then be refreshed, would it not?
That I don't know, without testing.
That's the witness at this time, Your Honor.
Nothing further, Judge.
You're subject to recall, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you for your testimony. Your next witness, please.
State call for Thurlow.
Raise your right hand, please.
Do you swear or affirm that your testimony before the court be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you.
From the state, please.
Thank you, Judge. Could you please state your name for the record?
Laura Thurlow.
And Ms. Thurlow, could you tell us just a little bit about yourself?
I'm a paralegal, legal secretary, mother of 3.
How long have you been a paralegal?
Probably a little bit more than 25 years.
Can you do me a favor? You're a little bit hard to hear. Would you pull that just a little bit closer to you? And tell me that again. I'm sorry. How long have you been a paralegal for?
A little more than 25 years. Sorry.
As a paralegal, do you work for criminal lawyers, civil lawyers, both?
I did criminal defense for about 15 years, and then after that I did civil law.
When you worked as a paralegal for a criminal lawyer, who did you work for?
Stephen Rocket Rosen.
And is he a local defense attorney here in town?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, do you work for a criminal lawyer or a civil lawyer?
A civil lawyer.
And what is the person's name that you work for now?
Thomas Thurlow.
And are you related to him?
Yes, ma'am. He's my uncle.
How long have you worked for him?
Approximately the last 3 to 4 years, I believe.
During that time that you've been working for your uncle, have you ever come into contact with an individual by the name of Leon Jacob?
Yes, ma'am.
When's the first time that you recall meeting or coming into contact with Leon?
In the beginning of January, I guess, or January of 2017 at some point.
Before then, had you met him?
No, not personally, no.
Did you know of him?
No, I knew of his father and mother. Yes.
And what did you know, just briefly, were they friends with your uncle?
They were friends with my uncle, as well as I had been in a motor vehicle accident in the 80s, and his father was an orthopedic doctor who treated me for an injury.
But other than that, had you ever come into contact with him?
No.
Did the microphone go out?
No.
There we go.
There we go. Sorry.
Ms. Thurlow, I want to talk to you about January of 2017, and I want to talk to you about an individual by the name of Leon Jacob. First off, do you see him here in the courtroom today?
Yes, I do.
For the record, could you identify something that he's wearing?
A gray suit, a tie with stripes and glasses.
And may the record reflect this witness has identified the defendant?
The record will so reflect.
When is the first time that you came into contact with the defendant?
In January of 2017.
And how did that come about?
He had come into the office wanting to speak with my uncle. He was concerned that he may have an issue, a criminal issue, and wanted to see if charges had been filed against him.
And did you help him check to see whether or not charges had been filed?
Yes, my uncle asked me if I could look at that up for him because I had worked in the criminal field before, so I did, and I looked up on the Harris County website and didn't find any criminal charges at the time.
What was the defendant's reaction after you looked up? You tell him, look, I don't see anything. How did he react to that?
He wasn't satisfied with that. He wanted to go to the courthouse and see if we could check at the courthouse.
Did you do that with him?
Yes, we did.
How did you get over to the courthouse?
I rode in the car with him.
What kind of car was he driving at the time?
BMW.
And what happened when you arrived over at the criminal courthouse?
We went to the clerk's office and looked it up, and there was no criminal history. Well, no criminal charges that had been filed recently.
And Was he satisfied with that?
At that time, was he satisfied that, I guess,
Okay, let me rephrase it just
Yeah.
a little bit. What was his response when he learned that no charges had been filed? How did he act?
we just kind of moved past that.
Where did you go?
We got into his car, and then he began to explain the story behind why he was concerned about why he may have criminal charges filed against him. And we drove to a hotel, the Holiday Inn, where his ex-girlfriend was working.
Did you know his ex-girlfriend?
No.
Where was the Holiday Inn located that he drove you to?
It was downtown. I don't know the streets, but I just know it was downtown. It was right before Super Bowl.
Can you describe for the jury how he was acting during that time period?
He was agitated, nervous. He was essentially trying to, he was a little bit desperate, wanting to get his girlfriend back. Apparently, he and his girlfriend had had some type of an argument. He had stated that,
Well, let me stop you there.
okay,
You said he seemed agitated. Did he want you to do something for him when you got to the Holiday Inn?
yes.
What did he want you to do?
He wanted me to try to speak to his girlfriend and see if I could get her to come back to him.
So what did you do when you got to the Holiday Inn?
I went into the Holiday Inn, and then I approached the desk where I guess the people that run the business are. And there was a gentleman, I believe his name was Kevin, he had dreads, and I gave him my telephone number and my name, and I told him that I was looking for Megan on behalf of Mr. Jacobs. He immediately knew who Mr. Jacobs was, and I told him, look, I don't think you should have her call him. Tell her that he should call me first, that I believe she needs to stay away from him.
Why did you say that?
Because of the impression I got from riding around in the car with Mr. Jacob.
Impression.
He was going on about wanting to get his girlfriend back. He was upset that she wasn't taking his calls. He stated that if she wouldn't take his calls, if I guess he was wanting me to talk to her and try to get her back with him. That was the beginning of the conversation.
And that's initially on your way over to the Holiday Inn.
Yes.
After you speak with the gentleman at the Holiday Inn, you leave him the information. Do you do something else at the Holiday Inn?
We drove around the Holiday Inn a few times. After we drove around the Holiday Inn, I believe we pulled into an area that was across from the Holiday Inn. There was like some bushes. It's a parking lot that faces the Holiday Inn. He had wanted me to look to see if her car was there prior to me going in the, sorry.
Let's pull the mic, just push it straight up a little bit.
Up.
Take that off.
Sorry about that.
You'll bend it, you can bend it, just bend it straight up.
Like that?
Try a little more.
Like that?
There you go, let's see if that.
Okay, is that better? Thank you. Nothing like hearing myself. Yes.
So he wanted you to check for what in the parking garage?
To see if her vehicle was in the parking garage.
Where were you all parked when he asked you to do this?
Across the street in a parking lot. There's some hedges right across the street from the Holiday Inn.
And what was he doing while you went into the parking garage?
He was just walking around the outside of that parking lot smoking a cigarette.
Did he tell you what kind of vehicle you were supposed to look for?
Yes, he did.
Do you remember what kind of vehicle you
I just, off the top of my head, I know it was a white vehicle. I don't remember if it was a Toyota, Nissan, off the top of my head, but I just know it was a white vehicle.
And did you look for the vehicle?
Yes.
Did you find it?
No.
What did you do after you looked for the vehicle? Did you go back and talk to him?
I did, and I told him that the vehicle wasn't there.
And what was his response?
I believe that's actually when he got a little bit upset, and he wanted to go and talk with me further.
So did y'all go somewhere from that location?
Yes, we went to a bar somewhere in Midtown.
You remember the name of the bar?
No, unfortunately.
Talk to us about what happened at the bar.
We just sat around and were talking, and he had a couple mixed drinks. I had a Diet Coke. That's all I drink is Diet Coke. And at that point, he began to explain to me about how he had gotten into an argument with his girlfriend. He told me that she was throwing plates and making a lot of noise. And so he had tried to put his hand over her mouth to kind of keep her quiet from the neighbors. And in that time, he said that...
Stop you there.
Okay. Sorry.
That's okay. We just got to keep it question and answer, okay? So is it your understanding that that's the night that she actually left him?
The night...
The night of that they got into the fight?
Yes.
Was that the night that she actually left him?
That was my understanding.
Okay. Did he start talking to you about your background as a paralegal?
Yes.
Talk to us about that.
He's questioned me as to what I used to do. He said, I know that you used to do criminal defense. And I explained to him that I did. And he said, well, I bet you know a bunch of people a bunch of people that have done a bunch of things. And I said, oh, sure. And we went into some of the cases that I had handled. And he said, do you know people in the cartel? Do you know people that do this and that? And I said, yeah. And we were talking about that.
So he asked you if you knew people in the cartel.
Mm-hmm.
What other kinds of people did he want to know if you knew?
Just basically any type of the criminals that we had represented in the past, murderers, killers.
At that point in your interaction with him, what are you thinking?
I wasn't thinking a whole lot at first, other than I was getting a little bit nervous as the questioning progressed.
Fix that mic for me.
Up again?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that better?
Yes, ma'am.
As the questioning progressed, I got a little bit more nervous because I began to feel uncomfortable. I felt like, where is this going? Where is this conversation going? We did laugh, but it would always come back to his being upset with his situation with Megan and his concern with Megan. And the focus kind of turned from what I did to Megan and beginning to question me and ask me if I knew. Well, first I apologize. He wanted me to see if I could go and talk to Megan and try to help him get her back, is what he was wanting me to do. And if I couldn't help him to get her back with him, then he wanted me to ask her to please leave town. And it kind of progressed. It went from there to where if she wouldn't get back with him, wouldn't leave town, then could I either personally, grab her, put her in a car, and take her to him, or have somebody do that. I could give you a syringe that you could use on her, bring her to me, and I'll take care of the rest.
So was it your belief that there were several options on the table at that point?
Yes.
And just so that we're clear, option A was to get her to go back with him?
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
Yes.
Option B was to get her to leave town?
Yes.
And then option C was to either you kidnap her or find someone to kidnap her, and then y'all would inject her with something and that he would take care of the rest.
Correct.
So to you, did that mean he wanted to kill her?
At that point, I didn't feel like it was, because I didn't know what the syringe was going to hold, but regardless, I knew that was completely not something I would ever even entertain or consider, obviously. But as the conversation continued further, then it was, do you know somebody that can take care of her? Have her taken care of, I should say.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about that and break that down a little bit more. So while you're at the bar and you're talking with him, about how much time has transpired from the time he showed up at your uncle's law office that day to the time that you're at the bar having this conversation?
2 to 3 hours, maybe. I'm going to guess. Maybe a little bit more.
What made you not worried or concerned about you not being at your job and working?
I became very concerned, but by the time we got to the bar, that's when about 2 to 3 hours had passed, I guess would be best. So maybe a little bit more time had lapsed once we got to the bar. And at that point, I began to feel uncomfortable, and I would try to text on my telephone. I was wanting to text like somebody at my office, or, hey, call me so I can be called back to the office. But he was always looking over my shoulder, So I felt uncomfortable, and I felt uncomfortable in general based on the things that he was discussing and asking about and inquiring about concerning who I know now, obviously is Megan. And so I said I need to use the ladies' room, and I got up and I walked over to the ladies' room. As when I got up to walk over to the ladies' room, he got up and followed me to the ladies' room and just stood outside the door and waited until I came out. So I didn't feel comfortable being around him at that point.
Did you ask him to take you back to work?
I did.
And what was his response?
You're mine for the night.
And
I talked to your uncle, you're mine for the night.
Did that concern you?
Yes.
How much longer did you all stay at the bar?
Not a whole lot longer after that. We got back in the car and drove back around the Holiday Inn where she worked again a few times. And then I told him that I lied and told him I had a family dinner that I needed to be at, and that my family would be waiting for me and looking for me. And at that point, he finally went ahead and drove me home, and I had him drop me off several houses away from my parents.
So what time did he drop you off? Approximately.
I would say probably close to 7 p.m.
And I'm sorry, and I know you've said this earlier, but about what time did he come into the office that morning?
Maybe about 9:30, 10 in the morning. So quite a bit of time had passed.
So is it fair to say you spent from about 9:30, 10 a.m. in the morning with him until 7 p.m. that night?
That's correct.
Now, you said that you had him drop you off several houses away from your parents' house. Why did you do that?
because at that juncture, I was concerned about safety and just didn't want him to know where I lived.
And did he leave?
Yes.
So let's talk about the next day. Do you go back to work the next day?
Yes.
And are you still working in the same place?
Yes.
What building are you located in, or were you at the time?
The Lyric Center, downtown Houston.
Okay. And did he return to the Lyric Center the next day?
Yes, he did.
Talk to us about that.
The next day he came back and again was wanting to find out if criminal charges had been filed against him for what, again, he stated that he had put his hand over Megan's mouth to keep her quiet. And then the story would change. It would go from that to he thought he had maybe busted her lip when he put his hand over her mouth to she bit my hand when I put my hand over her mouth. So again, we checked the records, and at that time there was still nothing there.
What did he want you to do next?
Keep looking.
For Megan or for records?
Oh, first for the records. Of course, obviously, we looked for the records. He wanted me to get in contact with Megan.
So what did y'all do that day?
On that day, we were driving around again, but this time he picked me up in a Mercedes station wagon.
And did he tell you whose vehicle that was?
Yes, he did.
And whose vehicle was that?
It was his friend Valerie, is what he told me, who I later found out was Valerie McDaniel.
During this time period, when he shows up the second day, why don't you just say, look, I'm not going with you. If you're scared of him, why don't you just say, you know what, buddy, I can't go with you today. I've got to work.
Well, that's a downfall of mine. That's one of my bad points, is not putting my foot down. That and wanting to make sure that I'm, I guess, appeasing my uncle, making sure I'm not causing a problem with my job situation.
Did your uncle want you to help him?
Yes.
So did you leave then that day, go with him in the Mercedes, and go back over to that Holiday Inn?
Yes.
What did y'all do when you got over to the Holiday Inn that day?
Just first we drove around a few times, and again, he pulled into that parking area where the bushes were and got out and watched the Holiday Inn looking for her vehicle. He seemed a little upset that her vehicle wasn't there, couldn't understand why it wasn't there, because she was in charge of Super Bowl, I guess, reservations and things like that for the hotel, and that she should be there. And he asked me to call a young lady named, I believe, Ariel on the phone, which I didn't want to do.
Okay, well, let me stop you there. Can you tell you who Ariel was?
Just a co-worker of Megan's.
And so did you call Ariel?
I did.
Now, when you're calling Ariel and he's asking you to do this, where are y'all?
In Valerie's vehicle.
And is it still just the two of you?
Yes.
Okay. Do you call Ariel?
Yes.
Do you talk to Ariel? Without saying what was said, do you have a conversation with Ariel?
Yes.
And do you try to reach out to Ariel again after that?
Yes.
Okay. And are you able to get in touch with Megan through Ariel? You ever talk to Megan?
No.
During the course of the time that you're spending with him in the Mercedes and he's having you call people, does the conversation ever come back around to the various options that he's pursuing in regards to Megan?
Yes.
Talk to us about that.
Again, I think the more that he is in the vehicle with me or on the phone with me, the more we talk, the more it's, I've got to get Megan back. I've got to get Megan back. You know, I love her. I need Megan back in my life. I have to have her back in my life. And then it would go again, like I said, from that to, if I can't have Megan back in my life, she needs to leave the state. She needs to be gone. She needs to go. And then he would eventually revert to, you got to know somebody that can, you know, get her, put her in the vehicle. I can give them a syringe. They can use the syringe on her, bring her to me, and I'll take care of the rest.
Did you have the impression during this time that this was just a lovesick guy who was missing his girlfriend, or did you feel like it was more serious than that?
At the time, I thought he was an extremely lovesick guy that was very bound and determined to try to get his girlfriend back, but it was progressing to a much worse place.
Did your opinion of just him being a lovesick guy change?
Yes.
Okay, and what caused that change in you?
Well, just the fact that we're using the word syringe and kidnapping and bringing her to him to be taken care of, or finding someone to take care of her, brought me to that point.
At some point, did you get him to take you back to the Lyric Center that day?
Yes.
He's told you that he has options, A, B, and C. Why don't you pick up the phone, call the police, and say, you all need to know about this guy. I think he's going to kill his girlfriend. Why don't you do that?
I went back to my office, upset, frustrated that I had been placed in that position, and I approached my uncle, and I explained to him what I was being told, and his response was, oh, he's, oh, okay, that's right. Okay.
But was your uncle good friends with the defendant's mother?
Yes.
And were they family friends?
Yes.
And so after talking with him, did you make the decision not to contact the police?
Yes.
When is the next time that you came into contact with the defendant?
Physically?
Yes.
The following day, I believe.
And does he come back to your office at that point?
Yes, he does.
And how is he acting on that day?
He is, I'm in the back. I've kind of made it clear to my uncle and to my coworkers that I don't want to be disturbed, I guess, by Mr. Jacob, because I've looked, there's no criminal history. I know what he's trying to do. I don't want to be a part of it. He begins walking up and down the halls of the law office and peering in the windows of the other office staff members' windows, other attorneys' windows, and
when you say he, are you talking about the defendant?
yes.
So he's pacing the hallway of the law firm and then also looking in windows of other lawyers or paralegals that are in the
Correct.
Did you contact security?
I did not at that time, but one of the attorneys in my office did. And may have been two attorneys in my office.
And based on their conversation, was the defendant allowed back in your office?
No, and they also instructed the security to, if they see him, to have him escorted off the grounds or have the police called.
So at that point, was your uncle on board with keeping the defendant out of the office?
Yes.
Did the defendant continue to try and make contact with you?
Yes.
Was it an obsessive type communication with you? In other words, did he continue to text you and call you?
Yes.
Did he show up at your work again?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
He would show up I'd be outside on the side of the building smoking a cigarette, and he would just show up, or I may get a text message from him saying, I'm downstairs, come downstairs. Another time, I got a email that simply said, at Beer Paredes, and,
Let me stop you there.
okay,
The email from an email address associated with the defendant?
correct.
And where is Vera Paredes in relation to your office?
Across the street, directly across the street.
And did you send anyone over there or check on it to see if he actually was over at the Vera Paredes like you said he was?
Yes, I did. One of my coworkers, I asked her to go over there to see if he was there. At this point, I had already made changes to how I exit the building on a daily basis because I was concerned about his, I would call irrational behavior. But she went over there and she took a photograph of him sitting, watching both of the openings, I guess, the entrances to my building.
So your coworker went over to Vera Paredes and took a picture of him?
Yes.
Did you have security help you at all with the situation?
Yes, well, that was in the early part of the day, early morning, mid-morning, when I had gotten the email, and then, so when it was time to leave, come to find out he was still there, and this is after 5 p.m., so I asked security to please escort me to our vehicle, and as we were being escorted out to the vehicle, he came out of the Vera Paredes, and he began to approach, and the security guard told him that if he came any closer, they were going to call the police, that he needed to leave. He went around the side of the building and just was kind of peering around the side of the building until the security guard again told him, I'm going to call the police if you don't leave. He
Stop you there. So is he still trying to make contact with you? The defendant, is he still texting you?
Yes,
Still emailing you?
still emailing, still calling incessantly, to the point where I changed my telephone number on 2 separate occasions.
And that didn't deter him?
No.
At some point, did you contact one of your friends named Kenneth?
Yes.
And without saying what was said, by Kenneth, did you talk to him about the problem that you were having with this defendant?
Yes.
And what did you ask Kenneth to do for you?
I just asked him if he could please talk to him and ask him to leave me alone.
And was it your belief that Kenneth was going to do that?
Yes.
At some point, did you call Kenneth back to determine whether or not he'd had success in telling the defendant to leave you alone?
I didn't have to. Kenneth had done odd jobs for me, and he had come to pick up some money for an odd job, and we were standing outside my office building when my phone rang, and it was Mr. Jacob. And I said, well, here he is calling. He says, give me the phone.
Okay, and let me stop
Right.
you there. So without saying what was said, did Kenneth have a conversation with the defendant?
He did.
Did the defendant continue to contact you after that?
He did.
Judge, may I approach the witness?
You may.
To show you what's been entered into evidence is State's Exhibit number 45, and I want you to just take a look at it for a second. Read it to yourself if you would for me.
Which part? I'm sorry.
Just take a look at it. Just read it to yourself real quick, just
Okay.
briefly. Okay, so let me stop you. Is what's contained in State's Exhibit 45, would that be a fair, just
assessment of some of the types of text messages and contacts that the defendant was making with you during this time period?
Yes, yes.
So did you receive text messages from the defendant, for example, things like, WTF, Laura, you disappeared again?
Yes.
And does it just continue over that time period?
Yes.
At some point, do you recontact or reach out to Kenneth in an attempt to get Kenneth to talk to the defendant a second time and get him to leave you alone?
Yes.
And what happens when you reach out to Kenneth that time?
Someone that I knew as Zach answered the phone, answered Kenneth's phone.
And about what time period are we talking about now? So if the defendant began talking to you and reached out to you and you first met him in early January, do you recall about when you called Kenneth's phone the second time and got in touch with who you knew as Zach?
I'm going to say in February sometime. I honestly don't know 100% the timeline, but probably around February.
What, early February? February like 4th sound about right?
Yes.
And did you learn that Kenneth had passed away?
Yes.
And without saying what was said, did you have a conversation with Zach in regards to the defendant?
Yes.
Did you tell Zach that the defendant was looking for a hitman?
No.
What did you tell Zach?
That I felt bad because I'm calling my friend who's deceased and to ask him a favor, to ask him to do a favor for me, to ask him to contact somebody that's still bothering me. And I felt horrible because I had just found out that he had passed.
Did Zach offer to handle the situation for you?
Yes.
What did you tell him about what was going on? What did you tell Zach?
Zach apparently had already known everything. He was friends with Kenneth, and Kenneth had, I guess, talked to him about it and told him about it. And so he talked to him, and he also essentially said, look, I'm ex-military, you know, I can take care of this. I can get him off your back.
And was your understanding that that's what Zach was going to do?
Yes.
Did the defendant want you to find someone from when you had been a criminal defense attorney to handle this for you? I think you mentioned that earlier.
That's what he had requested or stated to me. He stated that in conversation. He just made the statement, I'm sure you know some people that could take care of this for me.
Did he ever indicate to you that if you didn't help him, that he'd find someone else that would?
That would be the observation I made.
Okay.
Is that?
Yeah, tell me about that.
I felt like if I didn't help him, he probably was going to try to find somebody else. At the same time, I wasn't sure if he was truly a threat based on what I was being told by my family. So I was juggling with that situation.
After Zach, you believe that Zach's going to take care of the situation. Is that the last time that you really had any conversation with the defendant? You never talked to him again after that, did you?
Did I talk with?
The defendant.
Yes, I believe I did.
Okay, tell me about that.
Trying to recall everything. I apologize. He would still. Oh yes, he did call. He was upset trying to find Zach. Well, actually, he had contacted our law office and contacted my uncle and said that I had swindled him out of his money. And I had no clue what he was talking about at that point.
Did you take any money from the defendant?
No.
After that, did you have contact with the defendant?
No.
Judge, I pass the witness.
From the defense, please.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
You and I have met before, have we not?
Yes, we have.
And we've talked about this matter,
Yes.
correct? I think Mr. Papasil was also
Yes.
with me at that time, correct? I'd like to go to, if I may get that, the board. Yeah, just right there is perfect. It's great, thank you. I'd like to talk to you about those three options that the prosecutor discussed with you. And the first option you indicated was to
May I just over so I can see?
Certainly.
Thank you.
the first option was to have you intercede with Megan to basically get her to come back to Leon,
Correct.
right?
Yes.
Okay. And what did you do with that first option?
He had taken me to the Holiday Inn and we tried to reach out to Megan there. She wasn't there. But that's when I left that message with Mr. Hill, I believe his name is. Hill, Kevin Hill, I believe his name is, yes.
And did you personally go to the Holiday Inn yourself and make inquiry, or was it Leon?
He was driving and drove me over there, and yes, I went in.
All right. I'm going to put reunite with U-R-E. With Megan. But that fizzled out, right?
Correct.
Okay. And the second option, repeat the second option for me.
Second option was to ask her to leave town.
Ask Megan to leave town.
Yes.
And were you going to do that, or is that something that he suggested that you do, or he was going to do, or you were going to do?
He asked me to, if I couldn't get her to reunite with him, to ask her to leave town.
Okay. And where was she supposed to go if she left town?
I was not told where. I just was told she just needed to leave the state.
All right. The city Pittsburgh never came up in that conversation.
No.
All right. And you mentioned the third option, and I believe the prosecutor brought this out, was to have her killed.
The third option was to have her, have me grab her, put her in my car,
And the syringe.
and that he could provide a syringe. If I didn't believe I could do it, I could have somebody else do it. He would provide a syringe and then bring her to him, and he would take care of the rest.
He would take care of her.
Take care of the rest, yes.
And did you infer that from that conversation that he was going to do something to harm her? Aside from the syringe issue.
I didn't get the impression that he wanted any good to come to her.
I'm sorry?
I didn't get the impression that he wanted anything good to come of her.
Okay.
But he never did use the word kill with me directly.
Never used the word harm?
Just he wanted her taken care of.
I'm sorry?
He wanted her taken care of.
All right. Didn't use the word hurt or harm or anything of that fashion?
No, just no.
All right. May I approach a witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Do you remember Ms. Thurlow talking to the police about this matter?
Yes.
All right. And I'm going to ask you, did they talk to you about, or did you talk to them about the three options?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm going to ask you, if you would, to take a look at this and tell us what you told the police according to the officer about the third option.
May I see what he's referring, what document he's
You
referring
may.
to? George,
Yes,
can I see the document that you're
sure.
referring to?
Sorry. I think it's page 7.
Thank you.
If I may, Your Honor.
You may.
Tell us what you told the police as far as the third option is concerned,
Read it.
please.
Okay. The third option is to have someone kidnap her and inject her with something and bring her back to him so he can talk to her and straighten her out and they can get back together.
They get back together. So he was convinced that if she were basically put in a car after being shot with a syringe, he could talk to her after she came out of the mindset of having been influenced by a syringe, and he could talk with her and convince her to come back to him.
That's what I said.
Right. And there's nothing in here at all that would suggest harm other than being shot with a syringe or any killing or anything of that fashion.
Right.
Right?
Yes, because he did not use the word kill to
You
me.
might pull that together.
He did not use the word kill to me.
All right. But what he did say was so that with the syringe, she could straighten her out and they could get back together. Right?
Correct.
Okay. Now, you mentioned that, let me pull that board back. You mentioned that is this all right? You mentioned that you, at this time, were working with Mr. Thurlow.
Correct.
And that at some point in time, Mr. Thurlow kind of barred Leon from coming up to the office.
Correct.
Correct?
Yes.
Can you pull that just a
Yeah,
little bit?
sorry. Yes.
That's all right.
That's okay.
And this was transmitted to Leon, is that correct?
I don't know how it was transmitted to Leon. I know that he did find out based on a message that he had sent me.
All right. Do you know how I ended up representing Mr. Jacob?
No.
You don't know if there was any referral from your uncle or not to my office?
No.
Okay.
I wouldn't be surprised, but no.
Okay. Would it be fair to say that your assessment, generally speaking, of the actions of to include statements made, things of that fashion by Leon, could fall under the category of bizarre behavior?
Definitely.
I'm sorry?
Yes, definitely.
All right. And did it appear that obviously he was desperate to get back with Megan?
I believed, if you're asking my opinion, that he was, his first request was that he wanted to get back with Megan, but the more that I engaged in conversation with him, it was clear to me that he intended her harm.
That he what?
Intended harm to Megan. That he intended harm to Megan.
Hindering harm?
Intended her harm. Yes. Intended to hurt Megan. Yes.
And that was your impression?
Yes.
And that's nothing that he said, as you've testified before, a few minutes ago, to you, as far as wanting to kill or hurt Megan, right?
Like I said, he didn't use the word kill, but the actions, his actions and behavior and his aggressiveness spoke to me that that was his intention.
And that was your impression?
That was my impression, yes.
All right. Now, I may have asked you this before. Did it appear that he was desperately in love with her?
I believe obsessed would probably be the more accurate description I would use at this point, yeah.
All right. Was that obsession based on a sense of love, a desperate love for her?
In his mind, I believe so.
Okay. You remember you testified on direct about being at a bar.
Correct.
You don't remember which one it was. You remember what day? What?
I don't remember the day. I would, no, I do not remember the day.
When you were questioned by the prosecutor, you started to mention what Leon said to you at the bar, and that was not testified to. That was another question by the DA's office stopped you basically from testifying about what he said at the bar. You recall that?
Can you repeat that? I
Sure.
apologize.
It's convoluted.
Okay.
You're at the bar,
Uh-huh.
and the questions by the DA's office basically concerned what was going on at the bar with Leon. And then there was some question you were going to testify about what he said to you at the bar, I guess about Megan, and that question was never asked, or you never responded to that question because of going further to another issue by the state.
Okay.
Bottom line is, do you know what Leon said to you at the bar?
About Megan?
Yeah. Yes. Pardon.
About Megan. Essentially, I was told that they had been in a relationship. They had had an argument, a fight, that she was asked him to leave. They had gotten into some kind of a physical altercation. Again, he was concerned that there was possible criminal charges going to be filed out of that. And then it progressed to, from that to asking me again about what I did prior in criminal defense, and we discussed that and the type of people I represented, and yeah.
And I guess you have seen during the course of your representation not representation, but clients that come through your office that sometimes act in a bizarre fashion.
Sure.
And you described his actions as being bizarre.
Bizarre.
Have you not?
Yes.
Okay.
That's one way of describing them.
If I may have one moment, Your Honor. Pardon me. Where do you office now?
In the Galleria area.
Okay. Working for a law firm, or
Yes.
do you, have you had an occasion to talk about this case with the state?
Yes.
I'm sorry?
Yes.
Okay. As well as with me?
Correct.
When the car switch occurred that you testified to, was that something that was your idea, or was Leon's idea, or both of your ideas?
When the what?
I'm sorry?
When the what occurred?
Yes.
No, I didn't hear what the word was that you said.
No, when the switching of cars occurred, whose idea was that?
You mean when he came the next day?
Right.
He just showed up in Valerie's car.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you know whose idea that was, that he shows up in Valerie's car?
No.
All right.
No.
I pass this witness.
Nothing further, Judge.
I'm subject to being recalled. Thank you so much for your testimony. The next witness would be whom?
Megan Vericus.
That's going to take a while, obviously. It's 4:45. This next witness is going to take quite a while, so let's recess for this afternoon. Remember the admonishments, please, not to discuss the case among yourself, family, or friends, and we'll stand in recess until 9:30 in the morning. Where are we going to have a meeting?
Downstairs again.
Meet back downstairs as you were this morning. Thank you very much.
All rise for the jury.